I'm making a box for a set of checkers, and I'm starting with a piece of 12-quarter ash, and I'm cutting it to be about 12 inches long. Now this piece of ash is about 10 inches wide, and my jointer is only 8 inches, so I'm going to use a flattening bit on my CNC router to get one side flat. And this is a really good way to flatten a piece of wood when you don't have a tool that's large enough to handle something like this. This is a Laguna IQ series CNC router, and it has a capacity of 24 inches by 36 inches, so it's met all my needs so far. It can handle a pretty large piece of wood. Would I like to have something larger? Of course, but I don't really need it. And now with my table saw, I'll cut off the ends where the hold-down clamps were, and then I'll have this flat piece of wood that I can work with. 3 inches is the maximum I can cut with this table saw, so I may have been better off using my bandsaw for this. Next, I can run the piece through the planer so that both sides are flat and parallel. This one piece of wood is going to serve as the top and the bottom of the box, so I'm going to slice it down the middle. Next, I'll run each piece through the drum sander to get rid of the bandsaw sawtooth marks and to get both pieces the same thickness. I used a couple of hold-down clamps to put a block of wood at the end, just in case I needed to remove this piece so that I could get it positioned in exactly the same place if I needed to. It turned out I didn't have to do that. On the left side of the box, I'm going to place an owl, and it's going to have multiple colors. So this is a multi-pass process where I'm engraving for each color that I'll use colored epoxy for. This first pass will be for the outline of the owl and everything that's black. And then I'll mix up some epoxy and use a little bit of black dye. I'm applying a coat of shellac to help prevent the epoxy from bleeding into the surrounding area. After applying the epoxy, I use a heat gun to help expel any small air bubbles. And I'll let that cure overnight. Now I'll carve out the areas for the next color. And in this case, I mixed up epoxy with a brown tint. And again, I'll use a heat gun to get rid of any air bubbles. And now it's time to carve out the areas for the next color, and this is going to be kind of a golden brown color. Next will be the little toes and the beak, and these will be kind of an orange color. Now I'm carving out the eyes and the feathers on the breast. Next, I'm carving out the writing that goes on the right side of the board. And for the writing, similar to what I did at the beginning, I want to coat the top with a little bit of shellac to prevent the black epoxy from bleeding into the surrounding area. For the whites of the eyes, I'm using mother of pearl flakes mixed with epoxy. And unfortunately, my other camera was turned off, so I don't have a great shot of this. I mixed quite a bit of the mother of pearl in with the epoxy to have a very thick and dense mixture. And then again, I used the heat gun to get rid of any air bubbles. And I think this is even more important with the mother of pearl flakes because an air bubble could get trapped under one of those flakes. So you need to really tap it and make sure that all of the air is out. Now that I've done all those passes of epoxy and it's fully cured, I'll run it through the drum sander. Next, I'll trim the top and bottom to size. I already made a set of checkers and a box for the checkers for this client, but he contacted me about a year later and had his own design for a checker box, which I thought was pretty cool, and he asked me if I could make it for him. If you haven't seen those videos, I'll put links up in the corner. The top and the bottom are going to have side walls made from walnut, and it's the area within these sidewalls that the checkers are going to sit. The pieces of walnut are going to be attached with mortise and tenon joinery, so I'm using the CNC router to cut the mortises. The walls of the bottom piece are going to fit within the walls of the top piece, so I'm carving the mortise for the top piece first, and this is closer to the outside edge. Next, I'll carve the mortises for the bottom piece, and you can see that these mortises are further inwards. With the top and bottom ready to accept the walnut pieces, now it's time to start milling the walnut pieces. Now I'm planing the pieces for the walls to be a precise thickness, and this is to meet the tolerances needed so that the walls will fit within one another. And this was all specified by the client, so he did all the thinking on this one. And now with my dado set, I'm going to cut the tenons on each of the walnut pieces, and I'm going to just ease into the fit and test after each pass. And now on my miter saw, I'm going to cut each of the pieces to length with a 45-degree miter. Now, because the mortise that was cut by the router bit has rounded corners, I'm just rounding the corners of the tenons so that they will fit. After testing the fit, it's ready to glue up, and I will start with the top. After a few hours, I could free up my clamps and then glue in the walnut pieces for the bottom. It needed a little bit of sanding, but not too much, just to clean up some of the glue squeeze out. Next, the client wanted to have a 45-degree chamfer between each of the pieces of ash and walnut. And so I'm using a 90-degree V-bit here to get the 45-degree chamfer. And to get that same chamfer between the bottom and the top, I had to clamp the bottom to the top so that it wouldn't move, and then I ran it through again. And then with a real chamfering bit, I'm putting a 45-degree chamfer on the top and bottom as well. Now it's ready to finish, and I'm spraying it with pre-catalyzed lacquer with a satin finish. Although I used a satin finish, the client really wanted to have a matte finish to match the checkerboard that I made for him, and so I'm rubbing it with this Merlon pad. So you see how it works. You put the pieces into the bottom to store it, but when you want to access them, you flip it over to make it easy to pull the pieces out. So I gotta ask, would you make it?